While the viewer may know that Mike Mentzer created the heavy-duty training system for building bigger and stronger muscles, did you know that he also created a training method called Cardionics? It was a program designed to enhance general fitness and particularly aerobic health. Let's look into it.
Why is weight training such an important part of a total fitness program?
Well, actually, beyond that, weight training, Nautilus training or barbell training per se, is the only single activity that allows you to enhance the four components of physical fitness within that one activity, not having to spread it out over a number of activities. The four components, of course, being muscular strength, cardiovascular fitness, flexibility, and one that's not mentioned very often, stress reduction.
Mike Mentzer's training as a medical corpsman and neurology technician while in the Air Force had made him a valuable asset to Dr. Paul DeVore, a Hyattsville, Maryland physician who had been in family practice since 1961. Mike worked for him as a cardiopulmonary technician conducting EKG stress tests on DeVore's cardiac patients. Many of DeVore's patients suffered from a variety of health issues ranging from obesity to high blood pressure. Rather than simply prescribing drugs and telling people to take it easy in an effort to treat these conditions, Mike wondered if an exercise program might prove therapeutic for such people. But what type of exercise program would help them the most? Obviously, high-impact activities such as jogging simply weren't options. The thought prompted Mike to revisit his physiology textbooks. He happened to be reading the work of Swedish physiologist Dr. Per-Olof Astrand at the time. And while poring over Astrand's textbook on work physiology, he happened upon several passages that caught his attention. The cardiac output at a given submaximal oxygen uptake is in many types of exercise similar. Rhythmic muscular contractions will squeeze out blood from the veins, which to Mike indicated that it would thus raise the effective pressure of blood flow. Practical experience has shown that work with large muscle groups for 3 to 5 minutes followed by a rest or light physical activity for an equal length of time, then a further work period, is an effective method of training the heart. The tempo does not have to be maximal during the work periods. The above indicated to Mike that short bursts of energy maintained for as little as 1 minute seemed to produce a cardiovascular training effect. Astrand's major finding for Mike's purposes, however, was that, quote, non-stop rhythmical activity for short periods of time puts the greatest demand on the cardiovascular system, close quote. It seemed obvious that weight training performed in this fashion could have a therapeutic effect on cardiac health. However, the science of the matter had not yet found its way into the culture. Indeed, physical educators had criticized strength training for decades, believing that it would make those who performed it muscle-bound, inflexible, and that it had no benefit whatsoever to the cardiovascular system. Dr. Kenneth Cooper, for example, the man who launched the aerobics movement during the late 1960s, and who had minted the very term aerobics, had stated, quote, the weightlifter, these types, who have the right motives but the wrong approach, are stuck with the myth that muscular strength or agility means physical fitness. This is one of the great misconceptions in the field of exercise, that muscles that show, the skeletal muscles, are just one system in your body and by no means the most important. If your exercise program is directed only at the skeletal muscles, you'll never achieve real physical fitness, close quote. What Dr. Cooper and other physical educators at the time didn't fully appreciate was that it is mechanical work by muscles that is the passkey to the aerobic and other metabolic machinery within the body's cells. While the physical educators in America may have turned their collective back on weight training, Nautilus machine inventor Arthur Jones evidently had not. While continuing his research, Mike happened upon an article by Dr. James Peterson in the September 1975 edition of the Athletic Journal that reported how Arthur took 20 of his Nautilus machines to the United States Military Academy, USMA, in West Point, New York, for the purpose of conducting a study with its collegiate football players. The study took place over a 6-week period, using a protocol in which high-intensity exercise was performed on 10 weight training machines, each exercising a different muscle group of the body, with zero to minimal rest in between exercises. The study was supervised by the author of the article, Dr. James E. Peterson, who was then the Associate Professor of Physical Education at West Point. Peterson reported that the strength of the subjects in the study increased by 45 to 70%, while their flexibility increased by a factor of 8 to 11 times over that of the control group that was employed. But what particularly caught Mike's attention was the effect that this method of training had on the subjects' cardiovascular systems. Quote, "It was demonstrated that a strength training program, when properly conducted, can have a positive effect on the central components of physical fitness. Contrary to widespread opinion, not only will strength training produce increases in muscular strength, but will also significantly improve an individual's level of cardiovascular conditioning. The data suggests that some of these cardiovascular benefits apparently cannot be achieved by any other type of training." Close quote. Mike concluded that, quote, "Dr. Peterson noted improvement on each of 60 separate measures of cardiovascular fitness, including a lower and therefore more efficient heart rate during light, moderate, and near maximal levels of exercise. The participants even lowered their time in the 2-mile run by an average of 10%. Close quote. The results of the West Point study further cemented Mike's belief that Arthur Jones was light years ahead of the curve when it came to scientific, cutting-edge research, at least compared to the non-existent research clinic of Joe Weider and the world of bodybuilding. Armed with this data from Drs. Astrand and Peterson, Mike went to Paul DeVore and presented his evidence in support of starting a resistance training program for the patients. He labeled the method Cardionics. DeVore immediately saw that Mike was onto something. They began a private research project that was created and carried out under Mike's supervision. Certain patients of the doctor, such as those suffering from obesity and high blood pressure, were put on a program that was devised by Mike. It consisted of stretches and resistance training exercises that elevated the patient's pulse rate to 150 beats a minute and sustained this rate for 12 to 20 minutes. The sessions were conducted 3 times per week. The program was a tremendous success. Indeed, even 5 years after its conclusion, newspaper reporters sought Mike out for further comment on it. Quote, "Mentzer said he worked with a Washington, D.C. physician, Dr. Paul DeVore, in a privately financed research project to monitor the exercise programs of patients. Weight training was used to promote cardiovascular fitness 3 times a week for 8 weeks. Without exception," said Mentzer, "there was a marked increase in the cardiovascular fitness level of the people in the program. One 60-year-old man actually doubled his fitness level in only 2 months."
Cardiovascular benefits. Mike, people are now worried more and more about the shape of their heart. Is bodybuilding or weight training, let's say, can that supply that?
Absolutely, if done in a proper fashion. If you don't rest too long between sets and you allow your heart to sustain a certain elevated pulse rate, which is adjusted according to age, I think it's on the order of 20 minutes 3 times a week, you will enhance your cardiorespiratory health.
Mike's program of Cardionics was one of the earliest, if not the earliest, systematized training programs that used resistance training to bring about improvements in trainees' aerobic systems. From Mike's perspective, the success of the Cardionics program was simply further proof that it was time to bring more science out of the classroom and into the gymnasium.